The use of twist-lock Y splitters in data centers to power multiple power distribution units, or PDUs, raises questions regarding compliance with the National Electrical Code, or NEC. Understanding the NEC stance on temporary versus permanent power is crucial in determining the legality and safety of such configurations. The landlords claim that Y splitters are defined under the NEC as temporary power and are only authorized for a limited time needs careful examination. The NEC doesn't explicitly define or prohibit Y splitters in all contexts. The key factor is whether the installation meets the requirements for permanent wiring and safe operation. The landlord might be referencing the NEC general preference for permanent wiring methods over temporary solutions. Temporary wiring methods, as defined in Article 590 of the NEC, are typically allowed only for construction, remodeling, maintenance, repair, or similar activities, and are intended for a limited time period. Article 590.4 outlines conditions of use, specifying that temporary electrical power and lighting installations are permitted for a period not to exceed 90 days for holiday decorative lighting and similar purposes. Other applications, such as construction, typically have different time limitations depending on the specific circumstances. Article 590.3 provides a list of acceptable uses, including but not limited to demolition, construction, emergencies, tests and experiments, and developmental work. Article 590.5 covers general requirements, emphasizing that all temporary wiring must be approved and suitable for the intended use and location. This includes proper overcurrent protection, grounding, and mechanical protection. In contrast, permanent wiring methods are designed for long-term use and must comply with stricter installation requirements. These methods are covered in various articles throughout the NEC, depending on the specific wiring type and application. The relevant articles include Article 300 for wiring methods, Article 310 for conductors for general wiring, and Article 400 for flexible cords and cables, among others. Article 300.11 specifically addresses securing and supporting wiring and cables, ensuring they are properly installed and protected. Now, considering the specific scenario of using a UL-rated twist-lock Y splitter on a 20-amp circuit to power 2 PDU, each drawing no more than 8 amps, several aspects need to be evaluated. Firstly, the UL listing of the Y splitter is important. A UL listing indicates that the product has been tested and certified to meet specific safety standards. However, the UL listing alone does not guarantee compliance with the NEC. The installation must still adhere to all applicable NEC requirements. Secondly, the total load and the 20-amp circuit must be considered. With each PDU drawing 8 amps, the total load is 16 amps. This is below the maximum allowed load for a 20-amp circuit, which is typically 80% of the circuit's rating, or 16 amps. However, the NEC also requires that the overcurrent protection device, in this case the 20-amp circuit breaker, be sized appropriately for the load. Article 210.20 addresses overcurrent protection, stating that the overcurrent protection device shall have an ampacity not less than the non-continuous load plus 125% of the continuous load. If either of the PDU are considered continuous loads, meaning they operate for 3 hours or more, this rule applies. Thirdly, the suitability of flexible cords, such as those used in the Y splitter, for permanent wiring needs to be examined. The NEC generally restricts the use of flexible cords for permanent wiring. Article 400.8 outlines the use is not permitted for flexible cords and cables, including use as a substitute for the fixed wiring of a structure, where run through holes in walls, structural ceilings, suspended ceilings, drop ceilings, or floors, where run through doorways, windows, or similar openings where attached to building surfaces, or were concealed behind building walls, structural ceilings, suspended ceilings, or floors. Article 400.7 describes the permitted uses of flexible cords and cables. These uses are generally limited to connection of portable equipment, pendants, and specific appliances. The NEC permits the use of flexible cords for specific purposes but emphasizes they should not replace permanent wiring. Fourthly, the mechanical protection of the wiring must be adequate. The wiring must be protected from physical damage. If the Y splitter and its associated codes are exposed to potential damage, additional protection may be required. Article 300.4 covers protection against physical damage, requiring that wiring be protected from abrasion, impact, and other forms of physical stress. If the wiring is subject to physical damage, it should be installed in conduit or other protective raceway. Fifthly, the grounding of the equipment must be properly addressed. All electrical equipment must be properly grounded to minimize the risk of electric shock. Article 250 covers grounding and bonding requirements, specifying the methods for grounding electrical systems and equipment. Proper grounding ensures that fault currents can safely return to the source, tripping the overcurrent protection device and energizing the circuit. To determine whether the Y splitter installation is compliant with the NEC, it's essential to consider the specific requirements of the code and the local interpretations of the authority having jurisdiction, or OJ. The AHA is the local electrical inspector or code official who is responsible for enforcing the NEC. The AHA has the final say on whether an installation is compliant. The NEC is not a design manual, and it's important to consult with a qualified electrical engineer or licensed electrician to ensure that all installations meet the applicable requirements. In this case, it's advisable to consult with a licensed electrician who is familiar with data center electrical systems and the local interpretation of the NEC. They can evaluate the specific installation and determine whether it meets the requirements for permanent wiring and safe operation. If the electrician determines that the Y splitter installation does not meet the requirements for permanent wiring, alternative solutions should be considered. These solutions may include installing additional circuits, using permanently wired power strips, or modifying the existing electrical system to provide adequate power for the PDU. Ultimately, the safety of the electrical system is paramount. All electrical installations must be performed in accordance with the NEC and other applicable codes to minimize the risk of fire, electric shock, and other hazards. The landlord's concern about fire hazards is valid, and it's important to address these concerns by ensuring that all electrical installations are safe and compliant. Reviewing applicable NEC sections is essential. These sections are Article 210 for branch circuits, Article 250 for grounding and bonding, Article 300 for wiring methods, Article 400 for flexible cords and cables, and Article 590 for temporary installations. Local amendments to the NEC might exist and should be checked. The Y splitter itself should be UL listed and appropriately rated for the intended load. The connections must be secure and properly made, in accordance with manufacturer specifications and industry best practices. Consider if the data center environment introduces specific challenges such as high temperatures, humidity, or corrosive atmospheres. If such conditions exist, appropriate measures to protect the wiring and equipment must be taken. In summary, while the NEC doesn't explicitly prohibit Y splitters, their use in permanent installations, such as powering PDU in a data center, is generally discouraged. It often violates the code's intent for permanent wiring methods. Consult with a qualified electrician or electrical engineer to assess the specific installation and determine if it meets the NEC requirements for safety and compliance. If the Y splitter is deemed non-compliant, explore alternative solutions that provide permanent, safe, and code-compliant power distribution for the PDU. For instance, one can add dedicated circuits for each PDU to eliminate the need for a Y splitter altogether. This solution provides the most reliable and code-compliant approach, ensuring that each PDU has its own dedicated power source. This eliminates the risk of overloading a single circuit and provides better redundancy. Another alternative is to use permanently wired power strips. Replace the Y splitter with power strips that are permanently wired to the electrical system. This ensures that the wiring meets the requirements for permanent installations and eliminates the use of flexible cords for long-term power distribution. And finally, modify the existing electrical system. If the existing electrical system does not have enough capacity to support the PDU, consider modifying the system to add additional circuits or upgrade the existing circuits. This may involve installing new panels, running new wiring, or upgrading the service entrance. Any modifications to the electrical system must be performed by a licensed electrician and must comply with all applicable codes. Remember that the ultimate goal is to ensure a safe and reliable power distribution system for the data center. This requires careful planning, proper installation, and adherence to all applicable codes and regulations. Ignoring potential electrical hazards can lead to equipment damage, downtime, and even fire hazards. Therefore, always prioritize safety and compliance when making decisions about electrical installations.